Make every night a wonderful journey, no matter where you are. Good night, sweet dreams. The first story, The Strange Man. There was a boy named Marcus, who was at the age of 18, had lived a bad life of hurting and stealing from people. He was in a gang known as the Rowan 60. She stole from homes, mugged people, killed people, and abused his girlfriend. One day he was involved in a drive-by with another rival gang while talking to his brother. After all the chaos cleared and the screaming stopped, the gang drove off, leaving Marcus and his brother on an abandoned street corner bleeding out. As Marcus dying, all he could think about was what would happen after he died. Would he go to hell? Heaven? He did not know. After a few seconds, though, his vision started to fade, and he saw twisted curling hands reaching after his brother. But all Marcus could do was watch in horror as his brother was dragged beneath the rugged landscape of earth. After his brother was dragged, Marcus soon saw the hands reaching for him now. The hands were jerking and moving in all directions, and were cracking with every move. He was dragged beneath. He only saw darkness, thinking it wasn't all that bad, until he heard screams of unimaginable magnitude and evil demonic laughs. As he stared in the pitch-black pit, he saw a slight light pop out of nowhere. Then suddenly, as he moved closer to it, he saw it was turning to a covered walkway like a door. Once he got to the door, it was tall, taller than anything could ever imagine, but he also noticed it was hot, hotter than an oven, as if he was in a fire pit. Once he walked through the door, he noticed occasional hands reach for him. They were burnt and disfigured, missing fingers and crooked. The farther he got down the dark corridor, he kept noticing the hotter it got. Then he got to a bridge. In front of the bridge was a sign that chilled his very soul. The sign said, "Abandon all hope." And that was when he knew he was in hell. He was then dropped in a pit of fire where souls and demons ripped and tore at him. Minutes seemed like hours as he was being tortured, and as he screamed for dear life, he heard a voice, distant first, then it grew so loud that it pierced his ears. He then made it out. It said, "Your pain and sorrow is amusing and tasteful, but nevertheless I must obey the sacred rules." Marcus then had the courage to say, "Rules? What rules?" The voice replied, "The rules my old creator had once made. The rule states that any human that dies with sin is forced into this place, my home. But if he or she is revived in any way, at all back in the human world, they are to be put back on earth." As soon as Marcus heard those words, he was filled with joy. But the voice continued, "But a word of caution. Even though you have left my world, you have been tainted with the worst sin of all by entering this domain." When these words were spoken, Marcus awoke in a hospital bed screaming. He knew for no matter what he did, he would go to the place where damned souls go to be tortured for their sins. But the one thing that will be burned in his head is that on the door, in the blackness, he saw a hand that appeared to have the same clothing and rings his brother had on before he died. Then he realized his brother was not with him in the hospital room. Then he knew he would reunite with his brother in the world known as hell. The second story, Through the Trees. A crude drawing. It doesn't like photographs. I wish he would have stayed home, away from this cruel world that we live in, dear reader. Children shouldn't roam this world alone, but we can't keep them in their nest forever. My son left his room one night to the enchanted chirping outside his window, and I knew what this was, but only from my years of studying this creature. You see, there is a monster that wanders around the globe preying on innocent children, watching, waiting. I remember fondly. It was September 15th, 1983. That was the year my wife and I escaped the busy world of New York to live our lives in the country. North Dakota. We lived happily there for several years, until I discovered my one true love, studying the seed eater. The seed eater is a disturbed bird-human creature that roams the forests, stalking children, abducting them to be part of the legend. On June 19, 1987, I first saw it sitting in my tree on my front lawn. I was in a daze when I saw it. My destiny beckoned to me. It said, follow it, love it, and learn it. Around the same time, 2 weeks later, I awoke to a strange tapping noise on my front window. I knew it was him. I ran out of the house to see it sitting in the tree, just staring into my eyes. I was about to cry from the majesty of it. I remember it telling me that it wanted my help. I would do anything for it. On April 3rd, 1988, the seed eater arrived at my window again. I was overjoyed. It said it was time. And I remember. You see, the seed eater devours children to keep itself alive, indulging in their youth to live forever. I remember the little boy. Oh, what was his name? Oh, well, it doesn't matter. I remember going to his house and just simply knocking on the door at 4:20 a.m., but nobody would answer. I saw the bay window. It was the boy's room. I went to tell the seed eater. Let's just call him safe for now. He told me how to get his attention the next day. A couple of weeks went by, and the stench of the flesh was getting disgusting. Where was they? The parents of the boy put up lost posters last week. I wonder why they didn't worry for the first 2 weeks. Oh well, I'm not concerned. On May 14th, 1988, the boy was nothing but bloated, rotting flesh, and the say was nowhere to be found. I guessed my services weren't needed. May 15th, 88, he came, he took the body, and requested another. May 16th, 88, 6 kids killed, 6 kids devoured, 6 more requested. May 18th, 88, H.O. Ever Elo Sing P. makes me wonder. The killer monster seed eater came tonight. He said kids weren't doing the trick anymore. He wanted something bigger. If you're reading this, you may be the only hope to finding out the truth of this thing. In my room there is a journal. On page 49 you'll discover how to take the life out of this monster. But he's had me under a tight death grip. I couldn't do it, but maybe you'll have more strength than me. Goodbye everybody. I hope being eaten is what I brought on to myself. The third story. Suit. It has been my experience that in writing things down, they become easier to explain, yet I'm not quite sure how to explain this. Listen, I know that Slender Man is a lie, a totally made up 100 lie, but this story I tell you is 100 true. If not, then I'll burn in hell, or worse. About 5 months ago, I found out about Slender Man on the internet. It seemed amusing and funny, but I'm a horror guy, and it didn't faze me like many things don't. But that night I woke up to my kid wanting to be let out of the house. He was a stray I rescued when he was a kitten, and I never house-trained him. So when I opened the door, he started to walk out when all of a sudden he froze as if he was hit with some kind of a freeze ray. As I walked onto my porch to see if he was hurt, I glanced in the direction he was looking at. He was staring at this group of trees along a ditch, a few yards away from my house. I saw nothing wrong at first, but then I noticed that something wasn't quite right. It might have been that there were more trees than usual, or that some limbs had been cut off in certain areas, but I could vaguely make out a humanoid shape among the trees. And it was then that I sort of entranced, like I didn't want to move. But then a car passed, and I gathered my senses, and so apparently did my cat, because he scurried off into the lawn, did his business, and went back into the house. I looked back again, and there was no more shape to the trees, and that was the only event that happened for about 2 weeks, and I had well forgotten about it until I had my first dream. In my dream I was camping with some people I didn't know, and I was having the time of my life. And then when I went to go get some marshmallow sticks from some nearby trees, the entire mood changed. All of a sudden, the people had the same expression that my cat had had that one night, and they were silently murmuring to me not to get any closer, like as if they had made the same mistake and forever regretted it. It was then that there was only one tree, at least I think. It was a tree, since it had the same general shape. And the strange thing is that all the branches had no leaves, and they were moving, as if the wind was blowing, but somehow slower than my alarm rang and I woke up. What happened next has still haunted me to this day. I had scratches all over my chest, like someone had thought my chest was covered with dead leaves and attacked me with a rake. When I looked at them in the mirror, I realized they made a kind of shape at one point, near the top, like a circle that was pointy at the bottom. I blamed my cat for the artwork on my body, seeing as how I lived alone at the time. But even then I knew someone else had done it, and somewhere in the back of my mind I knew that this was just the beginning. For the next month, no new scratches or anything noticeable. Then I went home for Christmas, and it was very nice. One night a few days before Christmas, I woke up to the sound of my little brother screaming. As my eyes opened, I was filled with concern, but also something else. Like whatever was happening should be, or like there was no reason to try and stop it. Like I should just close my eyes and go back to sleep. But when he started screaming louder, the spell that was on me was broken, and I jumped out of my bed and ran down the hall to my brother's room. Right before I opened the door, he stopped, and I heard a voice. No, not a voice. A sound. I couldn't make out any words, but I understood it perfectly. It was a warning of what's coming next, as if this was a small sample. As I slowly opened my brother's door, 3 things struck me. My brother's bed was empty. The window was open, and there was a piece of cloth on the floor in front of me, like a piece of a black suit. Right then my mother woke up and approached me. I asked where my brother was, and she said that he stayed the night at a friend's. I started getting concerned, and so I posted on several forums and got the usual "you're overreacting" replies. So I tried to contact the original poster, the man who made up Slender Man, but I got no avail, as he did not reply to any of my emails. So I hit a dead end one night sometime later, in mid-January. I was up late because I couldn't bring myself to sleep, whenever all of a sudden I heard a noise at my front door, like a stick being blown against the wind. So I stepped into my living room, and all of a sudden I was frozen, like I really couldn't move. And then I saw him for the very first time. He slowly stepped out of my kitchen. He wore a black suit and tie. He was so skinny, I swear he was just bone under there. His face, there was nothing, but it somehow moved like 1,000 bees. 1,000 very tired, very organized bees. And the sound thing also like bees, but more intense and focused, not as random. He spoke not a word, and silently, slowly, calmly, controlling, I walked towards me. All of a sudden my spell was broken from fear, and I burst out of my front door. I ran for what seemed like hours, always swearing that he was right behind me. I finally reached friends and called 911. telling them my house had been broken into. When they arrived, they said there was no sign of forced entry, but that the door had been locked behind me, and my keys were inside. My friend said I could stay at his place, and I did for a few weeks. Finally, he was able to get the story out of me. He said that I should get a psyche evaluation, which I calmly rejected too. But after some coaxing, I finally agreed and went to the hospital. The doctor's results came in paranoid schizophrenia. That's what they told me. I was given a set of medication, moved out of that place and found a new one. It has been a month and a half, and nothing's happened, but at night, just before I turn off my light to sleep, I feel him again, and in the morning, that split second after you wake up before you open your eyes, I know he's there. I wonder if he'll ever go away.